But first, I read something today that I think we can all agree is pretty shocking. A Chinese mining company in Papua New Guinea made 48 of its local workers take a vaccine against this virus. They had to take it, or else probably lose their jobs. And God knows how safe that vaccine is. Sounds like it was actually part of a trial, China using foreign workers, not just in PNG either, to test its vaccine. Foreign guinea pigs. Terrible, right? Makes you think that is a dictatorship right there. Utter contempt for people's rights. But how does what China's dictators are doing in PNG differ from what the Morrison government wants to do right here with its vaccine? If in fact it manages to get one rushed out here next year. Yesterday the Prime Minister suggested that he'd like to force Australians to take his vaccine for the safety of all.
I would expect it to be as mandatory as you can possibly make it. There are always exemptions for any vaccine on medical grounds, but that should be the only basis.
Now, it's true, the Chinese vaccine, it doesn't seem to have been properly tested. An Australian one, though, should be. Even so, by late yesterday, Morrison sounded like he'd realised he's gone too far, saying they wanted mandatory, said, well, no, we can't actually force people to have an injection. But today it seemed like the government was back indeed again. Chinese mode of thought, Chinese dictatorship will make life very hard for you if you don't take its vaccine, if there is one. You probably won't get your social security payments. You probably won't be allowed to send your child to childcare or to school. One of the government's health experts said you might not be allowed to travel or go to restaurants. Here's the Health Minister today.
Would you consider making incentives for people to be vaccinated, such as no jab policy?
We certainly would encourage as many people as possible. We'd like to see a take-up of up to 95%, which is where we're at with our children's immunisation rates, 94.77% announced on the weekend, record rate. So we're doing the right thing as a country. We have absolutely kept on the table concepts such as no jab, no pay, no jab, no play, the things that we're all already doing that have helped Australia have one of the highest childhood immunisation rates in the world, and that saves lives and protects lives.
So would you link it to welfare payments, to school attendance, to travel, maybe even going to sporting events or restaurants?
We reserve the right, subject to medical advice, to take steps that might assist.
I've got to say, I find that rather troubling. And I don't think it's just going to scare those anti-vaxxers out there that think it's all a plot to, whatever. I'd probably take a vaccine, sure. But I also, by hell, I do not want to be forced to take it by my government. It must be my decision about what's injected into my body, not the decision of a government that, these governments, look at them, they make so many mistakes. Travel bans too late, nursing homes not protected. They're going to tell us we must have an injection. One that's only going to be, even if it does come, partially effective, say experts, maybe 20%, 30%. And who knows if any shortcuts have been made in the testing. No government should have a right to stick drugs in your arm. And it seems to me that Morrison and many of our other political leaders have gone power mad in this virus panic. But the public, they've terrified them so much, the public, that they're saying now, you do whatever you want to us, Prime Minister, save us. And I reckon these politicians, some of them are going a little bit crazy with this. If only, like the Victorian Premier maybe, they'd just done the basics, stop the virus from getting into quarantine hotels and save the very old, particularly in nursing homes. 13 more people dead today, by the way, the youngest in his 70s, 8 from nursing homes. Instead, the politicians are going nuts, doing stuff that does little good and a lot of harm. And I'll give you an example. States like Queensland, with no new infections, are still locking their borders to people from other states, like South Australia, also with no new infections, and vice versa, killing the tourism industry, killing our airlines. Qantas today having to sack another 6,000 Australians, those poor people, which left the Qantas boss fuming about our politicians.
When you have states with 0 cases closing the borders to states with 0 cases, there doesn't seem to be any medical reason or health reason or any logical reason for those to remain closed. So what we're after is a framework that is very clear. When do borders close? Because they may have to close again in the future. When do they open? Based on the scientific information that's available, and so that we have clarity for our people, for the tourism industry, for the travelling public. And at the moment, it doesn't seem to be medically or scientifically based. It seems to be more politically driven.
He's right. It's not medical. It's all political. And then these pathetic, cruel bans and delays that stopped a boy like Sean Rice, who survived a double lung transplant, going from his Tweeds Head South home, just over the border in New South Wales, for his checkup in Brisbane. And to see some other doctor. Couldn't get the permits in time. And how about the Queensland ban on letting a patient with very bad burns be flown the short distance to a hospital in Brisbane, and instead making them go on a plane to Sydney instead, twice the distance, and the Medivac plane, by the way, then out of action for so much longer for other patients. But the politicians, you know, they do these really tough things, really hairy-chested. They see their poll numbers go high, so they keep going. Why not? They love all this power. So much love, so much power. Even a curfew in Melbourne now, which is insane, and they keep thinking of new ways to keep it all going. The Prime Minister saying yesterday, when the vaccine comes, then we can start to relax these bans. But the vaccine may never come. And if it does, it may not even work well. Premier Andrews in Victoria, same thing. New infections in Victoria are going down slowly, thankfully. 240 new infections today. But the Premier says the lockdowns, the curfew, the home imprisonment, all those bans might not be lifted by the due date when these bans are supposed to be lifted 3.5 weeks from now.
Even though we got numbers in the low 200s and the trend is good, we just have to acknowledge that even at that number, even at half that number, if you opened up, you wouldn't have defeated the second wave, you'd just be beginning the process of a third wave. And I really don't think anybody wants that. Okay, we've got to do some things to stop this virus, but these bans are far too crude, hurting too many people. We've got to live like this until Christmas in Victoria. And get this excuse from the other day. The government testing in Victoria is showing fewer infections, and that's good, okay? Great. But no, says the Premier, fewer people are turning up for tests, so we can't accept this success. We can't relax the bans.
What I'm trying to avoid here, what we're all trying to avoid here, is that case numbers come down to a point where we start to think about opening up and what that will look like, only to be unable to do that because the test numbers are too low for us to have clarity about just how much virus is out there. It seems logical that there would be less testing, but not this much less.
So wait, so new infections might be going down, but we're not going to accept those results until more people turn up for tests. Until they do, the bans will stay. But get this. Last weekend, a cleaner in my office here tested positive. And all the staff, naturally, went out to get tested, had to stay at home until the results came back. But when we got to the testing stations, many of us were told, oh, if you've got no symptoms, no test for you, unless you go get a certificate as a close contact. Until then, go away. This happened to at least 4 of us. Well, some of us then had to lie to get a test done straight away. Oh, got a sore throat, or I've got a runny nose. Luckily, I did have a sniffle, so I didn't quite lie. But basically, the Victorian Premier then won't relax his bans until more people get tested, but unless you're sick or was with someone who was sick, you can't get yourself tested. Catch 22. On that basis, you can keep the bans going forever. No one turns up for testing because no one's sick, but until they turn up for testing, and you have to be sick to do that, the bans won't be lifted. It's just incredible. And all this time, this is what really gets me. These bans around Australia, they could be lifted right now if our governments perhaps put more effort into just testing a few treatments, possible treatments, that are right under their noses. Either hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malarial drug, or ivermectin, head lice drug. Both with zinc. That is the critical addition, with zinc. These drugs open the virus up for the zinc to do the work. And that's the bit that's overlooked by so many of the knockers of these drugs. I know there are debates about both hydroxychloroquine, now even banned as a poison in Victoria, and there's no clinical trials yet of ivermectin, so knockers of that too, but very prominent experts say they work in the field because they help get the zinc into the virus. I don't know what the truth is, but why are our government so utterly incurious about finding out about something that could make this virus much less deadly, could then stop this virus panic? Or is this power trip so addictive?